grouping of second-degree blocks is a 2-to-1 block. Again, I mentioned you may have a 3-to-1 or even a 4-to-1, but a 2-to-1 block means you have 2 P-waves for every 1 QRS complex. So you have to have 2 P-waves for every QRS complex, and they should be consecutively. So looking here, P-wave, I always say 1 P-wave, there's a P-wave, there's a P-wave. Overall, is this rhythm regular or irregular? It looks irregular. The P to P is regular. We have this drop beat. Look at the PRI. PRI there versus PRI here. And looks like it starting to repeat. So this is a second degree top 1. Increasing PRI, winky block, going on, whatever you identify it as, second degree top 1. Increasing PRI till you have a drop beat. This example here, P-wave QRS, P-wave QRS, P-wave no QRS, P-wave no QRS, P-wave QRS. The PRI looks the same for when the PRI is present. So overall the rhythm's irregular, upright P-waves, PRI is constant or the same, so this makes that a top 2. So now let's look at a 2-to-1. So P-wave, P-wave, QRS, P-wave, P-wave, QRS, P-wave, P-wave, QRS. So in addition to us having 2 P-waves for every 1 QRS, let's look a little bit deeper. So it says we have 2 P-waves for every 1 QRS. Look, you gotta look at the PRI also. So the PRI should be the same when it's present. So it's gonna be a very important deciding factor when we're looking at a secondary 2-to-1 versus a 3rd degree block. So look at the PRI interval. PRI looks the same for each of these when we have P-wave and QRS together. We do have P-waves without QRSs, so 1 P-wave, 1 P-wave, QRS. 1 P-wave, 1 P-wave, 1 QRS. So we have 2 P-waves for every QRS. So this is how we're going to look at a 2-to-1 block, how we determine it. They're also listing here is a 2-to-1 block associated with a narrow QRS complex is usually considered a top 1. Not necessarily top 1 with a secondary top 1 or secondary top 2, but a top 1, where is it at in the conduction? Is it higher up in the AV node or lower down in the AV node? If we have a narrow QRS complex, that tells us it's happening higher up in the ventricles versus a wider complex, which usually indicates it's happening lower in the ventricles. So a top 1 in this case is referring to the where in the ventricles is ventricular conduction occurring. So a top 1 versus a top 2. Top 1's narrow, top 2 is wide. So a 2-to-1 block associated with wide QRS, usually associated with delay conduction below the bundle of His, thus it's a top 2 block. So notice the width of the QRS. Again, if we're looking at the AV node, bundle of His, before it splits, this happens saying it's happening beneath here somewhere. So here's the bundle of His. It's happening somewhere lower than that. So that's a top 2 characteristic. If it's happening up here, it's a top 1. So top 2 is associated with a wide QRS, and a top 1 is associated with a narrow QRS, meaning it's happening higher up in the ventricles, or higher up in the bundle of His, or at or above the bundle of His. So how do we recognize it? Overall, the rhythm is regular. It is a regular rhythm. You have P to P intervals regular, R to R interval is regular. The rate's going to vary. you have 2 P waves for every QRS complex, and your PRI is going to be the same when present. So 2-to-1 blocks, secondary 2-to-1 is a 2 P waves for every 1 QRS, rhythm's regular, your PRI is constant. Versus a secondary type 1, which has increasing PRI. Secondary type 2 has the same or constant PRI, which have randomly drop beats. With a secondary type 1 and secondary type 2, the overall rhythm is irregular. So with a 2-to-1 block, so secondary 2-to-1 conduction, the rhythm is regular. I have more P's and Q's, but the rhythm itself is regular. So the causes of management 2-to-1 are those of type 1 and type 2 block previously discussed. So again, depends on your patient. How symptomatic is your patient? Just because we see this on the monitor doesn't mean we have to start pacing your patient. It's not saying you shouldn't be prepared to do that in case patient declines, but that shouldn't be our go-to, right? So will atropine help? Let's go back before that. How stable is your patient? Is your patient symptomatic but stable, or are they symptomatic but unstable? How's their perfusion status? Ultramental status, do they have any ultramental status? What's their blood pressure? All those is your patient hemodynamically stable or are they not? If they're not, we're gonna go to therapy. That therapy may include atropine or it may include transcutaneous pacing. So, types of secondary AV blocks, again, a good review. Type 1, look at the PRI, notice it lengthens each time till we have a drop beat. Rhythm overall is irregular. So we have irregular rhythm because this R-to-R interval keeps increasing until we have a drop beat either way. So overall, the P-to-P is regular, R-to-R is irregular. Overall, the rhythm is irregular because we're mainly looking at the R-to-R interval. Increased PRI, so it makes it a type 1. Secondary type 2. Overall, rhythm's irregular. We have 1 P wave QRS, 1 P wave QRS, 1 P wave QRS. The PRI is the same when it's present. We have these randomly drop beats. So notice irregular rhythm. We have random drop beats, but a P-to-P interval is consistent and regular. Our ventricular rate is irregular. So, secondary type 1, constant PRI when present with an irregular rhythm. And a secondary 2-to-1 block, again, 2 P waves. Two P waves for every QRS. The PRI is the same when it's present. Overall, the rhythm is regular because the distance between these R-to-R intervals is the same. So secondary type 1 is irregular, secondary type 2 is irregular. A secondary 2-to-1 conduction is regular. So if you're looking at your rhythm, you have more P waves than Q waves. Is your rhythm regular or is it irregular? That's going to be a deciding factor. That's going to narrow down and rule out the secondary type 1 or secondary type 2.